It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
What's up? What's happening? Welcome into a special edition of Take Command. Logan Paulsen there, Craig Hoffman here. And if you're watching in the middle of us, you see, that is Patrick Peterson. Pat P, our Audacy Sports NFL Insider and host with Andrew Filipponi of First and Pod, a podcast that we have extra disdain for this week because Pony's in Pittsburgh. That's just, because, that's my guy. But, it's a matchup thing this week. Pat, what's up, dude?
Right.
How are you?
I'm hanging in there. How you guys doing?
About the same. So obviously we wanted to have you on. Talking ball with you is always great, but especially, hey, we need someone to talk about a big cornerback acquisition. Well, who better than you? What'd you make of the Marshon Lattimore trade yesterday, just when you first heard about it and as you've kind of looked at it in the hours since it went down?
Yeah, when I first heard about it, this was a move that the thought that first came to my mind was the Washington Commanders are locked in on a championship run. I feel like they have all the pieces on the offense. They can score with anyone. Now they need that shutdown corner that's going to be able to slow down teams' passing attack, which they're going to start to get into, which in divisional play, going up against Atlanta and teams moving forward. So I thought this was a great move for them and their young secondary, for those young guys that learn from one of the best to ever play.
Yeah, so obviously he's a very good football player, and you were a very good football player, lockdown corner, maybe the best cornerback of your generation for a period of time. What does having a guy like that do for a secondary, and how can the defensive coordinator maybe change how they call a game when they have a guy with that high-level skill set in the back end?
Yeah, when you have a guy that have that, that label of a cover corner, that just makes the defensive coordinator job that much easier. He's able to help other guys versus trying to play more zones than anything. It gives you the opportunity to be a little bit more aggressive. And we all know Dan Quinn is an aggressive coach, but he also plays a lot of cover three. So now it may give him an opportunity to play a little bit more man now, to be in the receiver spaces a little bit more. So we're going to see, how this move end up helping their defense moving forward. But like I said, having a labeled cover corner, it just makes that defensive coordinator job that much easier to call plays, especially on third downs.
Yeah, I think we've seen that earlier in the year, the transition from kind of what they want to be to what they need to be for now. We can see how much that shifts back to the more aggressive calls we saw earlier in the season. My big question about this, Pat, is obviously how does he integrate in the middle of a season? You were with the same group of guys out in Arizona for a long time, and obviously we just had that benefit of continuity. Then later in your career, you moved around a little bit more. How hard is it, do you think, for Marshon to come in here in the middle of a season from both a learning the scheme standpoint and then the communication element, which we've seen is kind of the last missing piece in that Washington secondary? They've had some of those miscommunications. So how hard is it to get on the same page as the rest of the guys?
Well, I never had an opportunity to go through a trade mid-season. So, and every team that I pretty much played for had to, went through training camp, OTAs, and mini camp and things like that. So I had time to really understand the scheme, understand the different terminologies. So it is going to be different for Marshon, but I'm sure that Dan and the defensive coordinator is going to try to make it as easy as possible for him. He's a guy that knows how to play man-to-man, so I know that won't be hard for him. It's just going to come down to when those guys are in man-to-man coverages, about the communication. If it's going to be a top hat, if it's going to be in and out, is it going to be we're taking number 3? That's where the communication, for the most part, is going to have to be at its best, because, like you said, there have been some mishaps in the secondary. But now having a guy like Marshon that played in playoff games, meaningful games, he's a veteran, really can show these guys how much better you can be just communicating.
Yeah, and I'm not that super familiar with defensive back play, but how hard is it to learn a new scheme? I know you kind of alluded to some of the stuff there in terms of communication, but when I do draft evals or when I do free agent evaluations of corners, it seems like one of the positions that's most influenced by scheme. Are you pretty confident that he'll be able to transfer? And I know in your career you had times where you switched defenses. How hard is that? And can everybody do it, I guess is my question.
I don't think everyone can do it, because you do have certain type cornerbacks. You have guys who like to play man to man, like a Joey Porter.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have guys that can play off and really read the two-step like a Asante Samuel. Read the three-step like a Asante Samuel. So if like back in Arizona days, I was a man-to-man guy, so all of my defensive coordinators were man-to-man type of schemes. So that fit perfectly for me. And I came out of college into a man-to-man scheme versus going into a zone scheme. And it's different because when you're close to the line of scrimmage, you don't have to see anything else. Like you just have your eyes focused on this guy. When you're off, now you can pretty much see the entire field. Your eyes can get busy. You're not really dialed in on what you need to be dialed in on making the play on that given play. So it's a lot that goes into what guy fits into what scheme and how defenses or offenses want to call the plays.
So there's kind of this thought that like, well, cover 2 is cover 2, cover 3 is cover 3, and like, yeah, okay, we might have to cover 6 here, cover 8 there, whatever. Is that true though? Like the way I think we've seen this year that the Commanders' corners are playing cover 2, for instance, a lot better than they played it the previous year. So clearly, coaching matters on some level. But how much, how much is on the zone side of it? Cover 2 actually just cover 2 no matter where you are versus different keys or whatever the coaching points are that might change staff to staff.
Yeah, it's definitely different terminologies because since I've been in the NFL, I done played in 3 different versions of cover 2. You know, you have some guys that likes to really reroute. We call it like a high school cover 2. Then you have guys that like you to read the number 2. So if the number 2 comes out to the flat, now you're playing a true flat technique. If he goes 5 yard in, now you're going to sink into the number 1 receiver. So that's a lot more reading that goes into that. Then we have a squat technique to where if you are reading number 2 and he does run inside, now you're not going to play a man-to-man. You're going to play like a trail technique, almost like a 2-man, but it will be the same thing if he was to run a 5 yard out. So then I'm basically trapping the out. So basically my responsibility is if number 2 doesn't come out, I got number 1 underneath, depending on which coverage. If it's the trap cover 2, if it's country cover, high school cover 2, if it's read cover 2. So there's that's where you have to be really dialed in on what assignment calls for what.
So Logan, just from watching the Commanders this year and then whatever film study you've done on Lattimore so far, like are those Venn diagrams overlapping circles, or do you think that he's got some new stuff to learn based off what he's been doing and what you've seen?
Yeah, so I do think like in New Orleans they do play like a cover 2. Everyone plays a cover 2. It's a little bit more of a read, and he does a good job with it. Here, I think the Commanders do a little bit of both, and so again, that's where I think coming to a new scheme is going to be somewhat interesting. And something I want to ask Patrick is have you seen in his game that he can make this transition easily? Because again, like he's playing man. He's always kind of known as a man corner. They haven't been playing as much man, in my opinion, in New Orleans as they have in years past. Like they've kind of shifted to zone. Is that because of him? Is that the defensive coordinator? And can he make this transition? And from what the stuff you've seen,
I think just the league have changed with the way they're moving and designing plays to get guys open. So it's very tough now to really play man to man the whole game. Like you have to give your corners breaks at some point. And if you want them to perform at their best when you need them, which is the fourth quarter, so that's why you rarely see marquee matchups now. Like you'll see it every now and then. It's just teams, offensive coordinators are too good on scheming their guys up and running your guy around the field, to kind of tire you out to help their guy end up flourishing. Because I never forget when I had those matchups, like a Julio Jones, for an example. Julio Jones played majority of the game, by the way. Not saying this is just an example. I never forget playing Julio Jones. He runs like a slant, breaks it up. I don't even remember who the backup receiver was. They bring the backup receiver in to just run a 9 ball, just run him off. Bring Julio back in because that's my matchup.
Oh, interesting.
Bring Julio back in and run a dig or something like that. So it's those type of things that I think that goes into today's game because when I played, it was much different. It's not as many. It wasn't as many formations than it is now. So I think now just these offensive coordinators have got way too creative, and defensive coordinators are like, we'll just take our chances. We'll give our guy his chances on him, but it won't be like a 90% game type of matchup. That's just my opinion. That's just where I see it going.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. It reminds me of my favorite Belichick story. Logan, I think we've told this one before on the pod when he the first time he ever faced Vince Wilfork after Wilfork left, they just changed personnel groupings every single play to make Wilfork run on and off the field, on and off the field. So that makes total sense. And the thing is, in watching a little bit of tape yesterday on Lattimore, he was lined up almost exclusively on the right side of the field. Yeah. And I was curious, Pat, from your experience, like, is that kind of like a hitter in baseball, for lack of a better thing, where it's like, I'm just more comfortable over here? Is it a field, like, is the similarity of playing one side of the field versus, hey, I'm always the field corner versus the boundary corner, which I think is more how Washington has kind of done it this year. How do you think about that part of the translation for a guy that's kind of been in one geographic spot going to a defense that looks like it moves guys around based off something else?
Man, I don't think it'll be a problem just because, Lattimore was a guy who had an opportunity to draw those matchups throughout his career. So he had to move around the field majority of the game. So I think that won't be a problem. That's just how it was for me as well when I got to Minnesota. Like, I was a guy who bounced traveled all around the field. My first year with Zimmer, then he wanted me to be the right corner, but I didn't have a problem with it because I played right corner, 50% of my career. I played left corner 50% of my career. So I had experience on both sides. So I don't think it'll be a problem for Lattimore moving forward if they are moving him to the field or the boundary.
And so, like, I have no idea, and maybe you don't either. Like, what's the timetable for someone learning a defense like this? I know you said you kind of had the training camp window, all that kind of stuff to lay out, but have you been around guys or had experiences where DBs have been able to come in, learn a defense, and play within 7 days, or is
perhaps 2 games in 8 days since they play the Eagles next Thursday?
Yeah, our coverages, because like offensive guys, you can kind of give them a package. Defensive linemen, it's like those guys are, it's the easiest job on the field. But like corner, like what is the expectation here?
I think he'll be okay.
Yeah.
I think he'll be okay. But just because I've known guys who was in a Dan Quinn, defense, it is. It can be quite complicated to offenses, and frustrated to offenses, but it's pretty player friendly, So I don't think he'll have any issue on, getting down pat. The defense is just going, like I said, just going to come down to the terminology, especially when they get in the red zone, because that's when majority of the talking have to come, the red zone and third down. So just going to come down to him and the guys on the back end, him putting that extra time in with the coaches on getting the communication down pat.
One last thing I wanted to ask you on the Lattimore trade, and then we definitely want to talk to you a little bit about the Steelers as well, as you were obviously there last year and kind of how Mike Tomlin does his thing and all of that. What is the drop-off in having to guard a number one every week and be a number one corner versus being a number two? Because we've seen Benjamin St-Juste really compete at a high level this year, but picked up a lot of penalties, had some plays made on him, and now he gets to drop into that number two spot. What is the difference that having Lattimore in town has on St-Juste? How would you describe that drop-off from being a number one to a number two corner?
I won't necessarily call it a drop-off because you need two corners if you want to be good in this league, if you want to be able to compete in this league, because not this year is not really proven that, but we all know that it's a passing league, so you need guys who can cover. So I don't necessarily say that it's a drop-off. I think it's going to give him an opportunity to learn from a guy who had a ton of success in this league, learn from a guy who understands how important it is to study the little things. So I think this is a plus for him, moving forward in his career, if you want to look at it that way, because at the same time, you're still going to get opportunities. The ball's still going to come your way. What are you going to do with those opportunities? So, like I said, I don't see this as a drop off from number one to number two. We all know what Lattimore is. As long as St-Juste know who he is and be true to himself, and just go out there and continue balling. All this did was made our secondary that much better.
The other thing is I've talked to a couple like DB coaches around the league, and they brought up what you said there. It gives everybody in the room someone to learn from. And I was wondering if you had an example maybe from your career where someone taught you something that you were able to carry on and maybe pass on to other people. And just because, like, for tight ends, it's like, oh, this is how you run this route, or this is the position of the hands when you block. Is there something that you learned from a veteran? You're like, oh man, I carried that with me and it really helped me out. Like, as an example of how secondary play can be elevated from a veteran.
Man, Adrian Wilson, I was blessed to be his teammate for 2 years. He was like the OG when I was, when I was drafted there in Arizona in 2011. So just him just teaching me how to study film and understand formations, understanding the splits and things like that. So when he ended up leaving my third year, which was my first year being a captain, Bruce Arians' first year, and I was like, all right, now the keys is kind of mine. I have to, pass on the same tools and the same information that was given to me, because I saw what it have done for my career. And I'm always a guy that want to see other guys succeed and be successful at what they want to, whatever, their dreams or aspirations are as well. So, you can ask any of my teammates. It was never a moment that I felt like I wasn't trying to give back or get the best out of them.
On the Tomlin front, I look at what Mike has done in Pittsburgh, and it's obviously incredibly impressive, never having a losing record. But it's not like he is one of these Kyle Shanahan, like super detailed offensive coordinator types. Like, he has done it with leadership and discipline and all these things. And I look at what Dan's done here and how he's built a culture so quickly in DC, and I think there's something to that. But you've lived it. When you got to Pittsburgh and you saw the way Mike Tomlin operates, what stood out to you that explains why he's been so successful?
Just everything you just said, his leadership, just the way Coach conduct his business each and every day. It just demands excellence, man. You can't do nothing but respect that. And like I said, each and every day you walk in that building, you know exactly what you're going to get from Coach Tomlin. Each and every day, the building can be on fire. It's going to be the same Coach Tomlin, and he's a guy that's not afraid to have those hard conversations. And, he's not a guy that's not afraid to make those tough decisions. And that's why he's still the Pittsburgh Steelers coach. He's going to be there forever. Just signing a new extension coming into this season, and he just knows how to galvanize a team and put together a winning product each and every time they step out on the field, regardless what the circumstances are. So that just speaks volumes on the man Coach Tomlin is, and I had the honor and the privilege to be with him last year.
Yeah, I think fans they hear like, oh, he's a great leader, but it's hard to like contextualize that. Do you have maybe, because you played for some really good head coaches, guys that are kind of classified as being good leaders. Like, do you have an example maybe of something that he does or did with a player that you said, oh, this is why he is who he is, and everybody's aspiring to be more like Tomlin?
I have a couple. Just one of them, I remember my first training camp practice, raining training camp. And, everywhere I've been, when it rained, we're going inside. And mind you, like, I'm just going with the flow. I'm not the one complaining or anything like that. But Coach just said, before we even start stretching, Coach walking down the hill, he said, hey, bring it up. Everybody, bring it up. Took his glasses off. He said, y'all see this? He was like, yeah, we see this, Coach. Look like the sky's about to fall right now. Yeah, we see this. He goes, get your mind right, because I'm getting you prepared for when it happens. It won't be our first time seeing it. It won't be our first time feeling the rain, feeling a slippery ball, feeling the wet grass. Like, I want you guys to be prepared for it when that opportunity presents itself. And I be damned, Baltimore Ravens, the last game of the year, it was almost this identical weather that we had in training camp. So that's one of them. Another one, man, when we was on our losing streak, we had lost like 3 in a row. and we needed to win the last 3 games to get in the playoffs. And we needed help as well. I think we needed Jacksonville or somebody to beat the Colts, I think.
Yeah.
So we're on a 3-game losing streak, and Coach walks into the building, and it's snowing outside. It's a gray day, and you know how those days can be. It can kind of weigh on everybody.
Yeah.
Not Coach. Coach walking that joint. He was like, man, I don't know what y'all on right now, but I love football, man. Like football is my livelihood. Like I do anything for football. You know what I mean? And just was really asking the guys a question like how much you love football, right? And not really asking guys, each guy in the room, but it was just like a statement. And I just felt a different team when we went out to practice. And we was going through a quarterback controversy. Not a quarterback controversy. We were going through quarterback rotations because we really wasn't set on who the quarterback was going to be moving forward. But Mason ended up, being the savior for us and winning those 3 games and getting us into playoffs. But those are just small stories, man. I got plenty of stories when we was in training camp, mini camp. I mean, he got the best sayings in the world, so the guy's a freaking walking book, man.
That's good stuff. Real quick, as we're running short on time, just any quick thoughts on any key matchup or thing that you're thinking about with this Commanders-Steelers game this weekend that you think could tilt the game one way or another?
It's going to be a great game, man. I really do. It's going to come down to Washington's offensive line versus the Pittsburgh Steelers defensive front. I think that's where it's really going to come down to. Pittsburgh has a history of playing mobile quarterbacks. They know how to contain mobile quarterbacks, and they also do a great job of putting pressure on the offensive line. So and with Terrell Austin, one of the best defense coordinators in the game right now, with dialing up pressures, trying to confuse the quarterback as well. So it's gonna come down to how long can the Washington Commanders offensive line protect Jayden Daniels?
We'll find out on Sunday. It's a 1:00 kick on CBS. And then, of course, reaction to that game and every single other one. That's what they do on First and Pod. Patrick Peterson and Andrew Filipponi. Pat, always great to talk to you, man. Really appreciate the time. Thanks for joining us here on Take Command.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me.
And Logan and I'll be back with our full preview tomorrow.